The mock drafts are pouring in, and I want to provide my reaction to some of the most compelling recent scenarios from top analysts for the Buffalo Bills today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Well, folks, welcome in. I love mock drafts. I really do. We've done some fun iterations of mock drafts here over the last week on the podcast, and what I want to do is turn my attention to mock draft scenarios that I didn't create. There's been some really compelling mock drafts that have made their way through the interwebs, and I want to break down 5 of them for you here today on this episode. And so we're going to break down the most recent mock drafts from Dane Brugler, Adam Caplan, Peter Schrager, the Associated Press, Sam Monson. We've got a bunch to get into. And I want to start with Dane Brugler of The Athletic, who I think is the cream of the crop when it comes to NFL draft analysis. He is that dude. And he put out a 7-round mock draft. And so we have a lot to reflect on when it comes to this mock. And he does some interesting things with the Bills. And so let's talk about these picks, what I like, what I don't like. There's a big trade. So let's break it down. So Dane Brugler of The Athletic, he has the Bills trading up from 28 to 17 to select Brian Thomas, wide receiver, LSU. Let me give you the rest of the picks, and then I'll really break it down. So at 17, they get Brian Thomas, wide receiver, LSU. This does cost them picks 28, 133, 144, and a 2025 second-round pick. That goes to Jacksonville for pick 17, and of course, Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver, LSU. At pick 60, they get Cole Bishop, the safety from Utah. At pick 128, they get Javon Baker, the wide receiver out of UCF. At 160, Bo Limmer, interior offensive lineman, Arkansas. Also in the 5th round, Nelson Caesar, the 3rd edge out of Houston. In the 6th round, Tyler Davis, defensive tackle, Clemson. 6th round, Ethan Driscoll, offensive tackle, Marshall. 7th round, Kimai Vidal, running back, Troy. So that's the overall haul. Let's break it down. We'll start with the trade. So again, the Bills move from 28 to 17. And you know that I always like to reference trade value charts to really assess if it was a fair deal. And so the difference between pick 28 and the difference in 17 is 290 points. So the Bills need to make up 290 points worth of draft picks for this to be a fair trade. So they give up 133, which is worth 39.5 points. They give up 144, which is worth 34 points. And so now they have 216.5 points to make up after giving away 133 and 144. And as Dane pointed out in this mock draft, the Bills give away their 2nd-round pick in 2025. He did not specify if it's the Bills' 2nd-round pick or the Vikings' 2nd-round pick because the Bills have 2. But, again, like I said, they have 216.5 points to make up. And if you look at the trade value chart, that winds up being the equivalent of pick 75. So regardless if it's the Bills pick or the Vikings pick, that feels like a good value trade for the Bills. because that 216.5 points remaining is the equivalent of pick 75. So I think this is appropriate value for the Bills. In fact, I think they actually win the trade as it relates to what Jacksonville should have gotten in return for pick 17 moving back to 28. I think it's a big win for them in this deal. I think it's a big win for the Bills in this deal to not have to give up pick 60. And I think that after this deal, having given up 133 and 144, you look at pick 60 as an opportunity to maybe move back a little bit. So trade out of the second round, move into the third round, and maybe get yourself an extra pick, whether it's day 3 in 2024 or in 2025. So what do I like about this mock draft from Dane Brugler? I would say, like I mentioned on the trade, the value generally feels appropriate. I feel like the overall value of the players that he has them picking and the spots that they're selected, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the mix of positions makes a lot of sense. A double dip at wide receiver in the first and fourth round, getting a safety in Cole Bishop, an interior offensive lineman, an edge, a defensive tackle, an offensive tackle, and a running back. That feels like the right distribution of picks. Maybe you can make a case for a corner instead of maybe the offensive tackle. But I think it's the right positions. And I do like the idea of that wide receiver double dip. And I think it's a good pair of receivers to double dip with. Brian Thomas Jr. and Javon Baker. You think about what this team really lacked last year. It was down the field receiving talent. I think the best thing about Brian Thomas and Javon Baker is their ability to win vertically. You know, Brian Thomas has that pull away speed down the field that, you know, there's not going to be many guys that can match him step for step down the field, and really good ball tracking ability. And then Javon Baker doesn't necessarily win down the field with speed, but he does with size and physicality, and his ability to stack and create vertical leverage and make corners play through him is really strong. And I think there's a lot more to unlock with this game. And we talk so much about the current players on the roster and how they are very strong candidates to play in the slot. When you consider Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, Curtis Samuel, players that can play on the outside, but you definitely feel like are better in the slot. I think you get two legit perimeter guys here in Brian Thomas and Javon Baker to really round out your wide receiver core. So I like the idea of the wide receiver double dip, especially this iteration of it. And then I really love Kimai Vidal in the 7th round, that running back out of Troy. I think he's perfect for what the Bills are looking for. Power between the tackles and pass, you know, the ability to block and pass protection. Those are big time strengths of his. And that's exactly what the Bills are missing in the running back room. So there's a lot to like here. What I don't like about this mock draft scenario is I like but don't love Brian Thomas. He will have what I would call a 1-2 grade, late first, early second round grade for me in terms of how I value him. So in terms of how I value him, I wouldn't trade up to 17 for a player that I value as a late 1, early 2. But I do think that because of the terms of the trade, as I've outlined already, it's actually a plus value for the Bills. So that makes it more digestible to me. Real quick on Brian Thomas, because I think there's a strong likelihood that he could be the Bills' first round pick when it's all said and done. There is so much to like about him. Size, speed, vertical receiving skill. Really, really strong. There's just he has to prove himself in every other way. Winning short, winning intermediate, expanding his route tree, yards after catch. You know, he's in this LSU offense that asks the receivers to run a limited route tree. The best thing he does is get vertical, and he's got a great deep ball thrower in Jaden Daniels. It was like a great scenario for him to kind of do the thing that he does well, and it lead to a lot of production. I think he's got to prove himself in a bunch of different ways, where at LSU, he could just be faster than everybody, run by him, track the ball, catch it, and score a bunch of touchdowns and make a bunch of big plays. Don't get me wrong, that's exciting. I like that. But there's so much more to playing receiver, especially, now you're trading up into the top 20 for this guy. There's expectations, right? He's young, which is good. There's just there's stuff to unlock here. But if you're a bet on traits guy, which I say that I am, he's got traits. So let's see what the Bills can develop out of him. The other thing that I don't like about this mock draft is that I find myself more hopeful to get meaningful investments in the trenches, offensive line, defensive line. That's still the most important part of football. We can talk about receivers and running backs and corners and safeties, all this stuff all day long. But you got to be able to win up front. You got to be able to win up front. I think my biggest takeaway from the Super Bowl this past year, Chiefs 49ers, of course, Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. But I thought more than anything, the 49ers had a get-by offensive line, and I thought the Chiefs' defensive line beat them up. Go back to the Bills and Chiefs game in the divisional round. I thought the Chiefs' offensive line took away the Bills' defensive line's ability to really be productive and create more negative plays and help hide deficiencies in the second and third levels based on the injuries. So, yeah, football, we love all the fantasy football stats and all that stuff. Doesn't happen without trench play. So, when I consider what I don't like about this mock draft is that you have no big people drafted until pick 160 and quite a bit invested when you consider the picks and the picks traded in non-linemen. Now, I'll end with this on Dane Brugler's mock draft. If you said, Joe, you can take this right now, this will be the Bills' actual draft, I'd probably say yes. So for as much as I like to work through, okay, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, I am settling on, yeah, I'd probably take this right now if you gave me the choice. So there's the analysis that I have for you on the Dane Brugler mock draft. On the other side of it, we're going to get into Peter Schrager and the AP mock. AD Mitchell, a player we're going to discuss, a big trade up for Marvin Harrison. We're breaking all of that down for you here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with me. I've been told that I'm a competitive person, and you probably think that's true. Well, it is. I have a competitive side to me. We all do, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, folks, let's get into this next mock draft I want to break down for you. It comes from Peter Schrager of NFL.com. And one of the challenges that I had in putting this episode together was finding enough different mock drafts, right? I didn't want to talk about the same scenarios over and over again. And I say that because so many of the mock drafts that I was going to consider had the Buffalo Bills selecting AD Mitchell, the wide receiver out of Texas. And I'm not going to sit here and rehash the same talking points just to bring up more mock drafts. The point that I'm making here is there's a lot of mock drafts that you can find that have the Bills selecting AD Mitchell, the wide receiver out of Texas. But let's look at this through the lens of this mock draft from Peter Schrager of NFL.com, which he claims to be very sourced in the way that he put this together. So we'll talk about AD Mitchell in just a second. My biggest takeaway is the order of receivers that came off the board. So in this mock draft, AD Mitchell to the Bills at 28 is the sixth wide receiver drafted. He has Harrison going 5, Odunze going 6, Neighbors going 9, Brian Thomas Jr. going 20, Xavier Worthy going 24, Mitchell to the Bills at 28, and then Ladd McConkey 31. Jalen Polk 32. So that's 8 first-round wide receivers, AD Mitchell being wide receiver 6. What I like about AD Mitchell as the potential first-round pick for the Bills is that there's just an incredibly high ceiling. He's got size, he's got speed, he has undeniable talent. He's the type of player that you watch on tape and you feel like he has the ability to be a dude, a guy that can be a big-time weapon for an NFL passing game. Bigger receiver, but also a guy that has pretty good fluidity, pretty good ability to get in and out of breaks for a guy that's bigger. And, of course, explosive straight-line speed. I would say the 4.3 speed that he ran at the NFL Combine, I don't know that I saw that consistently on tape. I'm not sure his play speed quite matches that, but you knew he was athletic. There's a lot of big-time highlight reel moments in watching AD Mitchell. Has some alpha tendencies about him. So, right? You love the ceiling, you love the size, you love the athleticism, you love that it's a wide receiver. It's easy to identify what you would like here. What I don't like about this selection is that there is definitely some buyer beware when it comes to AD Mitchell. The smoke around that started coming out a few months ago where people were talking about effort concerns on tape. You know, being a big physical wide receiver, not necessarily being very good after the catch. The blocking feels inconsistent. And I would say that in my own study of AD Mitchell, I did find the effort to be inconsistent on tape. There are times where he's actually targeted on a route and he doesn't finish the play. Go to the TCU 2023 game. It's obvious to see. And on top of that, you know, Bob McGinn, super plugged in guy. He does these articles every year where he interviews all these scouts and puts together all these quotes. And that just came out this past week on Go Long. And some of the quotes about AD Mitchell includes the word uncoachable. And then there was a lot of information in there about how he's a type 1 diabetic and how that impacts some behavior swings and how, you know, there's just going to have to be some extra layers if you bring in AD Mitchell to support him to make sure that, you know, he can be consistent. So, yeah, there's some legitimate buyer beware. There's also some legitimate talent here with a high ceiling. So he's tough for me. And I guess the way that I truly look at this is I'd probably let some other team find out if he's going to be awesome or not, because I think there's a wide range of outcomes for what AD Mitchell can be in the NFL. And so maybe you look at your building and your operation and you feel like you have everything in place to unlock all the best components of him. But let's be honest, there's buyer beware. So for as exciting as he could be, you know, there's definitely some caution that you want to apply to it when considering multiple sources that come out and have a lot of concerns about his makeup and some medical things and, you know, stuff that's obvious on tape as well. So that's the Peter Schrager, NFL.com. AD Mitchell going to the Bills at 28. Wide receiver 6 in this scenario. Brian Thomas coming off the board at 20. And I point that out because in some of the mock drafts we're going to get to in segment 3, Brian Thomas comes off the board after pick 28. Let's just put it that one where he goes in the second round. I want to talk about this one. The Associated Press did their mock draft 3.0, and they have the Bills picking Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver out of Ohio State. They have the Bills trading up to number 4 overall. So from 28 to 4 to get Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's talk about this. First of all, what did that cost? It cost the Bills, of course, pick 28, 60, 128, 160. So in this draft, their first, second, fourth, and fifth round pick. And then in 2025, it cost them their first and second round pick. They get pick number 4, and they get a 2025 fourth round pick back from Arizona. So 2 1s, 2 2s, and a 5. What do I like about this scenario? Marvin Harrison Jr. to me is very, very, very comfortably the best player in this draft. Very comfortably. I think he is a much better wide receiver prospect than Joe Alt. I love Joe Alt. He's going to be a top 10 grade for me. Than he is offensive tackle prospect. I think he's a much better wide receiver prospect than Caleb Williams is as a quarterback prospect. I mean, this is legit blue chip talent. He's unbelievable. You want to poke holes in his game? Good luck, because there's not many to poke. Maybe you wish he was a little bit more dynamic with the ball in his hands. Minor gripe, folks. Minor gripe. He's as complete of a prospect as I've seen at the wide receiver position. Total stud. Best player in the draft. So that's exciting. What do you not like about the pick is, of course, what you had to give up. 2 1s, 2 2s, and a 5. For one player. For one player. You're amid a roster reset. You're trying to build this roster up in a balanced way to write the next chapter of the Josh Allen era, and you're giving away everything meaningful that you have this year and next for one player, and it's a wide receiver. Which not only flies in the face of your team-building philosophies this offseason, but also in what so much research tells you about having as many darts to throw at the board as possible. You're giving away your best darts. I'm sure Marvin Harrison's going to be awesome. There's no doubt in my mind. But is he going to be so awesome that you don't even think about everything that you gave up and the opportunity cost, right? That's what it comes down to. The opportunity cost. It is significant. Generally speaking, I don't like trading up. The only ways that I really like trading up is for a quarterback and you don't have one. You're going to go from 28 to 4 for a wide receiver in a deep, I mean, it's just hard for me. That's a hard pill to swallow. So yeah, one side of me, best player in the draft, blue chip talent, position of need. I think he's going to be awesome. The other side of it, massive opportunity cost. Massive. So if that goes down, the Jekyll and Hyde, right? I'm going to be all over the place trying to process that. I'll probably convince myself that, wow, the Bills got Marvin Harrison and just be happy. But boy, oh boy, that's a lot. That's a lot to give up. A lot for a receiver amid a roster reset. Giving away your best chances to get a lot of meaningful young talent for one wide receiver. It's a lot to think about. All right, there's a lot to think about with the next mock drafts that we're going to discuss. Adam Caplan having the Bills draft Xavier Worthy. Sam Monson with a real interesting choice. Troy Franklin at 28. Let's talk about that here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with me. Today's podcast is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data that you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. And of course, a comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, folks. Some real interesting ones here to close out our conversation today. Adam Caplan of Pro Football Network and Sam Monson of Pro Football Focus. So Adam Caplan, one-round mock draft. He has the Bills sticking and picking Xavier Worthy, wide receiver out of Texas, at number 28 overall. I want to just talk about Xavier Worthy as a prospect and just how the wide receivers fell in this draft. So in this draft, the top 3 are gone by number 6. The next wide receiver drafted, Xavier Worthy at 28. That's interesting, right? And then he has Brian Thomas going 32 to the Chiefs. So the top three are gone by number 6. No wide receiver comes off until 28. And then Brian Thomas goes to the Chiefs at 32. And, of course, pick 28, Xavier Worthy to the Bills. Pretty interesting, right? Let's talk about Xavier Worthy. He's a pre-draft visitor for the Buffalo Bills. I think we should be predictively considering him as a realistic option for the Bills to pick. 5'11", 165, 31 and an eighth inch arms, 8 3/4 inch hands, RAS score of a 9.41. Very productive player at Texas. And even for a smaller guy at Texas, there's a lot of volume there, right? So it's not like he was just a specialist, just a deep ball guy. He did quite a bit for that offense. 69% of his career snaps played in wide alignment, so not in the slot. 7.3 yards after catch per reception, average depth of target of 13.7, a drop rate of 7.1%. What do I like about Xavier Worthy? Well, of course, the speed, right? He ran the fastest 40-yard dash in the history of the NFL Scouting Combine, and there simply isn't a player in the NFL that can run step for step with him down the field. And because he can put so much vertical stress on a defense, that's going to open up so much spacing for his teammates underneath, and of course for his own production opportunities, where if you can just run by people and nobody can turn and run with you, imagine what that means when you can snap off and work down stem, right? It puts corners in a bind. There's a lot to think about there. And I think he is pretty deceptive as a route runner. Like sometimes you watch a fast guy and they're just fast guys that don't do anything to like get open outside of just running past people. I think he does have separation quickness. I do think he has some deceptiveness in his route running. I think he's very good in terms of yards after catch. He's going to win every single foot race. I think he does have good vertical ball tracking down the field. And I think as the NFL incorporates this new return stuff, a guy like Xavier Worthy is pretty dangerous, right? Like, get the ball in that guy's hands and see if anybody can get the right angle on him. He's also an experienced punt returner. For his career, 40 returns, an additional 43 fair catches, an average of over 14 yards per return. He does have 2 muffs on 83 fielded punts. And that's obviously a box that the Bills need to check. So, yeah, there's so much big play potential with Xavier Worthy, not just vertically, but get the ball in his hands, and it's tough to bring down. And for 5'11", 165, quite a bit of volume that went his way at Texas, which you like to see that. Now, at the end of the day, there are concerns. He's extremely thin, 5'11", 165. So playing through contact, being physical, winning in contested areas, winning in congested areas, not going to be strengths of Xavier Worthy. You probably have to create some runways for him to be able to utilize his speed, right? And you want to get him going on over routes and, of course, go balls and that type of stuff. But it'll be interesting to see how he handles the physical nature of what's going to come his way in the NFL. He's not a guy that's going to really extend his catch radius, sub 32-inch, 31 and an eighth inch arms. He's not going to be this big time, like, extend his catch radius. And I do think that I saw a lot of inconsistency with his hands. I saw some very disappointing drops. I think he's got good ball skills, not the same thing as hands. Ball skills, can you track and put yourself in position to catch the ball? Hands, can you catch the ball? I know his drop rate's pretty low, but I saw some very disappointing drops. So plenty to like, plenty to be concerned about. Interesting that it's a stick and pick at 28, and he's the 4th receiver off the board with the top 3 going to the top 6, with Brian Thomas going 32. The last one I want to talk about here is Sam Monson, PFF, has Troy Franklin as the Bills pick at 28. Brandon Dorlus, the defensive lineman from Oregon, at 60. We'll talk about Troy Franklin here. In this mock draft, the top 3 receivers are gone by pick 11. He has Adonai Mitchell going 24. Then Troy Franklin as wide receiver 5 going to the Bills at 28. He has Brian Thomas coming off the board at 46 to the Colts. So we start with The Bills trading up to 17 for Brian Thomas. We end with Brian Thomas falling to 46. I don't know what to tell you. That's mock drafts for you. That's why you can't marry yourself to any specific outcome. That's why you can't sit here and tell yourself that you know the valuation of these players through the lens of the NFL. You just don't know. So the rest of the first round, again, it's the top 3 gone by 11. Adonai Mitchell, 24. Wide receiver 5 is Troy Franklin to the Bills at 28. Lad McConkey comes out, I think, at 33. Xavier Leggett, 39. And then Brian Thomas, 46. Troy Franklin, he's a likable player. I think he's got good route running. I think he's got some really good moments of catching the ball and ball skills. I think he's very clearly a dynamic vertical threat. But, man, he plays small. Anything physical is tough for him. You can't ask him to block. You can't do it. Can't get off contact at the top of routes. I think he's going to get beat up in the NFL. And I know that he's a little over 6'1", 178 pounds. I know I just talked about Xavier Worthy, who's 5'11", 165. I would say Xavier Worthy at 5'11", 165 plays physical and bigger, and I'm still concerned about it, than Troy Franklin at 6'1", 178. He's just so lean. And you just see when corners are willing to be physical with him, he gets beat up. He just does. So would I like the vertical ability? Yeah. I just think there's too many limiting factors for him, especially at 28. I just think that's too early. Then the Bills at pick 60, they get Brandon Dorlus, defensive lineman out of Oregon. I'd like this pick a lot at pick 60. 6'3", 283, 33.25-inch arms, RAS score of an 8.66. 3-year starter. This past year, 5 sacks and 8 pass breakups. Played in 51 consecutive games at Oregon. I like him a lot. He's got length. He's physical. He's explosive. I love his ability to play with extension, and he's got over 33-inch arms, and that ability to lock, peak, shed is really good. He's got knockback power in his hands. I love that he's got 8 pass breakups. He can get his hands in throwing lanes and really disrupt. And I think that athleticism shows up on tape where when he has a greased angle, he can really power through. He's got that quick twitch that's pretty noticeable when watching him. I think the biggest concern with him is that he's high-hipped, and so leverage is always an issue. He doesn't have his pads are not low, and so he loses a lot of leverage battles. He plays a bit tall, and for as good as his length is and how powerful his hands are, want to see him kind of work on more hand counters to get off blocks and string together moves. But at pick 60, I think this would be a great selection, and I think he could play on the edge and on the inside and provide a versatile piece for the Bills' defensive line rotation. So I like him at 60. Troy Franklin at 28 is just too rich for me. All right, folks, there you have it. Some reaction to some very intriguing mock drafts, of course, all focused on the Buffalo Bills. Tomorrow on the podcast, we are going to reflect on the pre-draft press conferences. We're going to hear on Thursday from Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott. We're going to hear from Josh Allen and select players. And so they'll answer the questions the best they can. I think Brandon Beane tends to be pretty open in these settings, so I'm excited to hear from him. And, of course, this is going to be the first time we hear from Sean McDermott and Josh Allen since the Stefon Diggs trade. And there's going to be some good nuggets, I'm sure, coming out of all of this, so I'm going to break that down for you tomorrow on Locked On Bills. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.